and public policy events in Washington, D.C. and around the country. C-SPAN is brought to you by your cable or satellite provider.
Washington Journal continues.
Ronald Kessler joining us about his latest book, The Trump White House, Changing the Rules of the Game. Good morning to you.
Good to be here.
Talk about this idea of the rules that are already in place and what Donald Trump has brought as far as change.
Well, obviously, he's changing almost everything. He's standing up to countries like Syria by sending missiles in. He is deregulating so that the stock market has been booming. The unemployment rate is at record low levels, including the black unemployment rate. He has gone after ISIS, removed the shackles on the military to almost totally destroy ISIS, got Saudi Arabia to go after radical Islamic terrorism. So if you look at the big picture, it is very, very impressive. And I say he's going to be seen as one of the greatest presidents, just like Reagan, who was also reviled by the media, but yet got rid of the Soviet Union and got the economy going. At the same time, the book is a truthful account that tells it like it is. It has lots of negative items, juicy tidbits, and it explains who this guy is, and that is the hardest task of all, as you can imagine.
And the prologue to this, you wrote this saying, but beyond the outrageous comments and tweeting, beyond the infighting and dimension, there was another story that the media largely ignored, sweeping presidential action that indeed was making America great again. Never before has an American president had so much impact on the country and a world so short a time as Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Can you write that and still look objectively at the president?
Oh, yeah. You know, if you're an honest journalist, you can do that, although there are very few honest journalists left anymore. This is really the first truthful book on Trump and his presidency, as opposed to what I call a novel, which was the Michael Wolff book, almost totally fiction. So much of it obviously fiction. You know, Melania was in tears on election night. Donald Trump looked like a ghost because he never wanted to be president. Just absurd. And what this book does is has dozens of new items that you never knew about Trump. And one reason you never knew is that he doesn't want anybody to know. He likes to have a mask over his face and project this tough guy image. So, for example, the fact that he hands out $100 bills to janitors for when they move furniture, doesn't like to hear about it, doesn't want people to know about that. When I interviewed him at Mar-a-Lago, and it's the only interview he's given for a book, and I asked him about that, and he sort of obfuscated. Well, where did you hear that? How do you know that? He just cannot stand to have anything personal out. The same with the fact that Melania is a very powerful force. I quote Reince Priebus on the record as saying that her judgment is impeccable. She sits in on meetings. She contributes strategy. Never came out before. And again, she's derided in the press as a fool and idiot, even though she speaks 6 languages. And so I just separate the myth from the reality.
There's a picture of you and your wife with Donald Trump. How long have you known President Trump?
I've known him and Melania for 2 decades. I first got to know him when I flew down with my wife Pam, also a former Washington Post reporter, to do a book on Palm Beach. I call it my midlife crisis. I had to drink more champagne and go to more parties. And on the way down, he imitated the nasal constricted tones of the Blue Bloods, the old guard in Palm Beach, condemning his club, Mar-a-Lago, because it admits blacks and Jews. To this day, there are some clubs in Palm Beach that do not admit blacks and Jews. And he said to me, I want to be loved, and I enjoy sticking it to them. And that's exactly what he's all about. He wants to be loved, but he enjoys sticking it to anybody who gets in his way.
You said you sat down with the president for this interview. What other sources do you have within the White House for this book?
I really had unprecedented access. If you combine the interview, which is he's never done for a book, knowing him for 2 decades, and interviewing a lot of the key people, the people who are actually in the Oval Office, and you can see many of them on the record, others are not. But it is the real story, and I think people will be amazed to find the real truth about things. And one amazing thing is just a Washington Post story that I cite, August 14th of last year, which quoted emails turned over by the White House to congressional committees in which Manafort, the campaign chairman, says, no, we don't want to go to Russia. We have to warn Trump not to do anything with Russia. His deputy says the same thing. Manafort assigns someone to make sure no one follows up on this proposal by Papadopoulos to go to Russia and meet with Russian leaders. What more do you need to know about Russian collusion? At the same time, I take the side of the FBI on some issues. For example, why Hillary was not indicted. I explain why the law would not support that unless there was real show of criminal intent. And so I think...
And that case wasn't made, you're saying?
The reason she was not indicted is that's right. There was no evidence of criminal intent, as there was with other people where the FBI was able to charge them with lying to the FBI and therefore show criminal intent.
So our guest will be with us for the half hour if you want to ask him questions about his book and the things that he found out in interviewing President Trump and other people. Again, 202-748-8001 for Republicans, 202-748-8000 for Democrats, 202-748-8002 for independents. Mr. Kessler, you talked about those two faces, so to speak, of Donald Trump. Talk about the public face, particularly his style of management. Much has been made about how he conducts his White House, particularly the inside and with his closest advisors. How would you describe that?
Yeah. Well, he is his own chief of staff, and he constantly canvasses people for opinions, his advisors, but also about a dozen friends, most of them billionaires that I list in the book, as well as just chambermaids and Secret Service agents. You know, there's a reason why the working class voted for him, and that is that he appreciates their common sense. So, you know, to try to pigeonhole someone who has great influence besides Melania is really fruitless. I quote Norma Forderer in the book. She was the top aide to Trump for 26 years. When she joined the Trump organization, it only had 7 other employees, and she says there are 2 Donald Trumps. One is the one you see on TV who makes these outrageous comments to get attention for his brand and now for his presidency. So it's a strategy. And then there's the real Donald that only insiders know, who's just the opposite. He's thoughtful, he listens, he's careful when he makes decisions. He didn't build this empire worth billions of dollars by being a fool, an idiot, or a bigot.
And what's the takeaway, though, with the rash of people leaving the White House of late? You highlight Reince Priebus, you talk about Steve Bannon. Some days he's okay with Jeff Sessions. Yesterday he criticizes Jeff Sessions. How do all those play into how a White House is conducted?
Yeah, and by the way, I explain why Sessions is doing a great job. You know, Trump has this habit of just blowing up when he doesn't like something. And one example is when back at Mar-a-Lago, Martha Stewart showed up, and Tony Senecal, the butler at Mar-a-Lago, opened the door, and she said, "Could I take a tour of Mar-a-Lago?" And Tony said, "Sure, we'll set it up for 3 o'clock tomorrow." And then he told Donald. Donald said, "Fine." Later in the day, Trump was in the private quarters. Tony checked with him to see if there's anything he needs. And Trump started screaming at him, "You son of a bitch, you dumbass, you should have scheduled it for noon tomorrow," because then Martha would see the club members, and the club members would see Martha. At that moment, Melania walked in, and she said, "I don't think you should be talking to Tony in that tone." So that tells you that she will disagree with Trump and provide her wisdom. And nothing more was said. But then the next morning, they were both Tony and Trump were in the living room of Mar-a-Lago, and Trump handed Tony $2,000 in cash, in $20 bills, would you believe? That was his apology. And I asked Tony, wasn't that strange that he offered the money in $20 bills? And Tony said, "Everything about Mr. Trump is strange."
The book is, again, The Trump White House, Changing the Rules of the Game, authored by Ronald Kessler, joining us for this conversation and your phone calls. Our first call for you comes from Earl, and Earl is in Arlington, Texas, independent line. You're on with Ronald Kessler. Good morning. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to jump right in. There's not one executive order or specific bill that's been passed to target directly African-American unemployment rate. He has nothing to do with that, Donald Trump I'm referring to. Number 2, he himself referred to the unemployment rate as a con during the Obama administration and said that the real rate was more like 30%. It has not been calculated any different. It's just somehow it's a double standard because now he's saying it. 3, he did not destroy ISIS. They had 15,000 members in ISIS. They were fighting against 4 different countries. He himself had nothing to do with that. It was just sheer time and will of the other people to get rid of ISIS. 4,
okay.
Can you name any policy he changed for the military that has changed the rules of engagement? And I would like to hear your answer. Thank you.
Okay.
Sure. Well, first of all, on the unemployment rate, the reason that it is at historic lows, lower than any point in recorded history, is that Trump is deregulating, and that has made CEOs feel that they can expand and hire more people. And that's also why the stock market is up 40% since the election. A lot of this is psychological. People feel they can invest, that businesses are not going to be demonized the way they were under Obama. Now, into all the details of military engagement and how he removed restrictions, that's in the book. I quote people like H.R. McMaster, whom I interviewed. So you can either believe that or not. People just have blinders on. They can't possibly comprehend that this person, who does make outrageous comments and certainly does make up stories, could actually produce solid results. But the results are very obvious if you read the newspapers.
And Rhonda from New Jersey, Democrats line, you're on with Ronald Kessler. Go ahead.
Good morning, America, and boy, do I love my country. I'm just calling to say that I want to give a shout-out to Melania Trump for rising above all the gossip in the media, and I really wish we would cut this out. I am so sick of Mueller. I'm tired of them overwhelming our president when we have so much to do to fix in this country. I'm angry at Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell for not coming out and assisting this man in an office, the most powerful office in the world. And they are totally silent. It's enough. The people in the South don't know Trump. We in New Jersey, New York area, we always knew Trump. He was always a playboy when he was a younger man. But this man is a genius. And if we allow him to put a vision forward for this country to rebuild our infrastructure, no one will ever be able to even come near the United States of America.
Rhonda, thank you.
You mentioned Mueller. That was a result of Jared and Ivanka urging Trump to fire Jim Comey as FBI director. And that, of course, led to the appointment of a special counsel. When I interviewed Trump at Mar-a-Lago, he asked me what I think of Mueller. I've interviewed him many times. I've written 3 books on the FBI, one of which led to the dismissal of William Sessions over his abuses. And I said he's a man of integrity. He's turned around the FBI to make it more prevention-oriented. That's why we have not had a successful foreign terrorist attack by a foreign terrorist network. And he appreciated that. Behind the scenes, he actually does listen and is totally calm and in command. So that is my take on Mueller. And I think, eventually he's going to finish his investigation. I think he's wrapping it up. And he's going to find no collusion, as I cited that Washington Post story, making it clear the campaign wanted nothing to do with Russians.
2 quick things to the FBI's actions with the lawyer Michael Cohen and concerns about attorney-client privileges. What's the case there?
I think there's something there, and I'll tell you, White House aides have never been impressed by Michael Cohen. They feel that he's an embarrassment when he gets on TV and starts, aggressively attacking the host. This is obviously a separate investigation. It was approved by the acting U.S. attorney in New York, who was a Trump appointee. Sessions is a Trump appointee. It's very hard to turn all that around and assume that this is some kind of witch hunt. Certainly there's a witch hunt against Trump in the media in general. I've been interviewed by mainstream reporters for this book, The Trump White House, and they just can't contain themselves. They have to snicker and make derisive comments whenever I say anything positive about Trump. That's their way of communicating.
The caller had brought up his Playboy past, and that's what she used. When you hear stories then about Stormy Daniels, do you think those are legitimate concerns to be explored, or is that a distraction in your mind?
Well, it's obviously a story. I think it's important to keep in mind that these activities occurred more than 10 years ago, and Trump has gotten older, as we all have, and hopefully wiser. And we haven't heard anything in over a decade about any activities like that. You know, when you see Melania and Trump together, as I've seen them together many times at Mar-a-Lago, there's no way they could cover up a bad relationship. They have these intense conversations, discussions. My wife Pam and I saw them at Mar-a-Lago just before New Year's Eve, and also at the New Year's Eve party, which I described. That's worth the price of the book. And they laugh and they tease with each other. It is very, very charming.
From Conover, North Carolina, Brad, go ahead.
I was just wanting to know why Trump made fun of a handicapped guy, why he belittled John McCain, why he told Howard Stern that his Vietnam was trying not to catch an STD when he got 5 deferments, and sure, he should hand out $100 bills to the janitor because he's crapped a lot of people out of their money. Why can't he get a loan in the U.S.? Why does he have to go to Deutsche Bank or something like that to get a loan? And I don't know, on and on with the guy. He's a phony. He's not like you say. He probably is not worth $11 billion like he says. He might not even be worth $1 billion.
Okay, thanks, Brad.
Yeah, some of those comments make me cringe. I have not met a Trump supporter who does not say the same thing. And it's part of his shtick to get publicity. He wrote in The Art of the Deal, even bad publicity is good because it draws attention to me. And that's the way he operates.
Is Donald Trump then aware about his actions and what it does to the office of the presidency overall?
An interesting question. He obviously is not concerned about that. He's more concerned about results. And that, I think, is what he will be remembered for. Decades from now, we won't remember the tweets, we won't remember the comments that make us cringe. We'll remember the effect of the tax cuts in boosting the economy, the stock market, getting rid of ISIS, safer America, and that's the way presidents are remembered. The same with Reagan. Totally made fun of by the media, and years later a lot of the top media people have admitted they were wrong about him, and in fact the Gallup poll found that he was the greatest U.S. president according to this particular poll.
Sheila is in Far Rockaway, New York. Independent line.
Hello, how are you this morning?
Fine, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, always interesting conversations going on here. The statement he made about him bringing up the employment of African Americans, that was happening already. And deregulating didn't make that happen. You don't even know what they deregulated. So I don't, and you're a friend. You're a very good friend of his. So there's bias with everyone. Everything you're saying about him is good, and you make the comments about President Obama, like he didn't do anything. He got 2 wars. Housing collapse, Wall Street falling, people losing jobs before with President Bush. It took him 8 years against a Congress that never even helped him. And he walked into a situation that was already rising.
Okay, thanks, Sheila.
Yeah. If you read the book, you see that even though I am a friend of Trump, I acted as a journalist because over and over again, I have criticism, I have negative items, and there's no way that I was trying to do a puff piece because by definition a puff piece has to have everything positive. The unemployment rate is unprecedented. That means that even though there were improvements under Obama and then some down dips, never before in recorded history has the unemployment rate been this low. So those are real facts. And I think over time people will start to recognize that, wow, this economy is great, we have jobs, we're safer, and they will start to recognize that Trump really has brought results.
Republican line from Kentucky. Dan, go ahead.
Yes, I hope you mention the books quite a few times the title, because sometimes I get on there and I miss the title of books, so I don't know what the title of the books are. But I was wanting to know how he felt about the, investigation. And, you said you cringed a while ago when you hear Democrats call and complain and whine and all that. I don't cringe. I call it the comedy line then, because they really cracked me up, They just, it's just like talking about the passing the bill in the Senate. They said, well, they hold the majority. Well, 51, and you got 51 votes, they still need 9. So, unless the Democrats get on board, help him out, it's not like he's really got the the Senate. So that's why I don't cringe when they call and complain and whine and wimp. I kind of laugh about it, so it's like the comedy line. I think if they get on board and help him, he could be the best president in this century, because we've already seen the worst.
And Ron Kessler, with that in mind, has the president said anything or in the interviews, or did you ask anybody about the upcoming midterm elections and particularly what it might do for the remainder of his term?
I didn't get into that with Trump. Certainly he believes he's going to be reelected. And again, the economy is number one, I think, when it comes to elections. And the polls have already constantly underestimated his support. So I think he will win. I predicted in a Daily Mail article in January 2016 that he would win the presidency. That was before he was nominated. So I think I have a pretty good ability to see around corners.
So you also mentioned the interview you did at Mar-a-Lago. The president frequently calls the Mueller investigation a hoax and refers to that. Did he talk a little bit about that?
I asked him why did he get so agitated about this investigation? There's nothing there, and he said, "Well, I just want the truth." I think part of his reaction is again staging. He wants to be the center of controversy, and that enhances his power. If he's the number one topic of conversation every day, the number one topic in the media, foreign leaders want to meet with him. They want to kowtow to him. You see the result with North Korea of his threats. He's always using the carrot and the stick, and that's what he's doing with Putin. He's doing that with the Chinese leader who just voted for sanctions against North Korea in the UN for the first time. Now he's starting to say that he may reduce tariffs on auto imports. So already Trump's threats are paying off. You really have to use your intellectual prowess to separate in your mind what is going on here, the results versus some of the noise that is upsetting from time to time.
Here is Steve in Ohio, Independent Line.
Thank you for taking my call. I think people don't really understand his thought process. So how do you evaluate his thought process from the standpoint of political versus non-political, emotional versus logical, the various things that go into his thought process, and the fact that he changes so quickly? Is he data-driven versus non-data-driven?
He's like a prize fighter. He's always counterpunching and feinting and bobbing and weaving. So he's unpredictable. That keeps people fixated on him, just as they were in The Apprentice. That is the way he operates.
202-748-8001 for Republicans, 202-748-8000 for Democrats, and 202-748-8002 for Independents. You can send us tweets at C-SPAN WJ, and if you want to make comments about this on our Facebook page, do is at facebook.com/C-SPAN. From Virginia, this is Cheryl in Yorktown. Hi.
Hi. First, 45, Trump was not selected. He was not elected. He was chosen. 2, he needs a good PR. Yes, he's not all bad. There are great points that he has. He needs to work on, he needs a good public relations. He has to improve on his appearance, improve on his overall acceptance by people. That way people will be more accepting of those good points that he has. Let's start with taxes. The first thing he should do, release his taxes. And he's not a billionaire. He will be by the time he leaves office, though. That, speaking of all of this $1 trillion budget, need to ensure that he and his name is not associated with any contracts or any business dealings as a result of this budget. Remember, honesty. People do not trust him. And
okay, caller, thanks.
You know, on his net worth, Forbes does a very intensive listing, as you know, of the net worth of the top billionaires, and Trump does release his internal figures to Forbes when they do their accounting, and they're very tough, and they do list him as having over $3 billion in net worth. You know, all you have to do is look at his buildings. They exist. He obviously built them with some money. A lot of these things are so obvious, just like Michael Wolff's claim that Trump didn't want to be president. He looked like a ghost on election night. Melania didn't want him to run, even though she actually was the one who urged him to run, and that she was in tears on election night. All you do is look at TV, and when the Wolff book says that he can't remember anything, well, all you have to do is watch him on TV when he is in a conference, and of course remembers everything that he needs to remember.
I was reading in your book about his relationship with the media, particularly how he loathes them, and yet he depends on them. And in some cases, he even calls directly to talk to reporters. To what extent does he communicate directly with the media? And, you know, how does that compare to the face we see of him attacking the media?
Yeah, well, occasionally, like every few weeks, he will call a reporter that he likes, such as Maggie Haberman at the New York Times, although she always writes negative stories, and maybe he's wised up to that by now, I don't know. But, and then he will frequently have these conversations attributed to a source in the White House. He knows that enhances the importance of the story. It's an exclusive story. At the same time, it creates the impression that there are more leaks in the White House than there already are, and that's not very good. You know, in the book I say that Kellyanne Conway is the #1 leaker in the White House. When I interviewed her at the White House, and it was recorded, she apparently forgot that she was on the record, and she started lambasting Reince Priebus, Jared and Ivanka, calling them leakers, calling Priebus things that were just obviously untrue. And I also interviewed aides who told me that they've seen text messages from her to reporters leaking material.
She pushed back against that, though.
Well, she actually didn't deny it. She said, you know, I'm friends with Jared and Ivanka. I was just there for dinner, but she knows it's on digital recording, and that again is harmful because it undermines his agenda to have these leaks and criticism of other aides.
From Cindy in Washington State. Go ahead. Cindy, you're on.
Hi. I just wanted to thank you for writing such an honest book about the president. I can't wait to read it. And I wanted to also say I want to read Jerome Corsi's book. It sounds really good. But I also want to say a shout-out to QAnon on 4chan. Thank you guys for doing so much. I really appreciate it.
So, Ron Kessler, then, with this book completed, because things change so fast in this White House, how do you follow up on that? Do you have other interviews with members of or another interview with the president?
You know, there was a Washington Post review over the weekend that was very favorable and said it's a trustworthy book, but it sort of missed the point. It was like, this is a history. No, the book is actually meant to really explain this guy for a long period of time. So it really is not dependent on the latest development in the news. It goes into all his policies, explains them, and the negative aspect as well, and really tries to flesh out with anecdotes such as I mentioned with Melania and Tony the butler, just how he thinks, how he operates, how he makes decisions, why he chose one person or another person, Romney or whatever. So I think it's a book that's going to be lasting.
The Trump White House, Changing the Rules of the Game by author Ronald Kessler. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.
We'll get another perspective on the Trump White House from PBS Frontline documentarist Michael Kirk. He talks about his latest project called Trump's Takeover. We'll have that conversation up next. Later on in the program, NASA plans to launch a new satellite designed to look at Earth-like planets in the solar system. Martin Still, one of the mission's main scientists, will join us for that conversation. This is Washington Journal Continues.